and welcome to another Smaulgld live stream. Today is Monday, September 24th, 2018. And tonight we're going to be taking a look at the COMEX Silver Vault, the update on the commitment of traders from Friday, and also what's being held or what's not being held in the silver ETF and also the gold ETFs. First, take a look at what happened to the gold and silver markets today. Gold opened at 1196, closed at 1199, reached a high of about 1203, essentially a flat day. Silver had a little more volatility and was up slightly a bit more. Opened at 1417, went all the way up to 1435, and closed the day at 1424. Cryptocurrencies, they were up most of the day. They fell off the last couple of hours. Bitcoin down about 1.5% at about 6,600. Bitcoin Cash down a bit more. Remember, this a couple of days ago it was well over 500. It's now at 461, down about 6% over the last 24 hours. Ethereum, which had also hit about 250 some odd dollars a couple of days ago, is now at 228, down about 6-7%. Litecoin at 58, that had also been up to $68 just a couple of days ago as well. So we're seeing some up and down movement in the cryptocurrencies. Before we get into the silver story, we're going to spend the bulk of our time just some updates on, there were two big stories today. There was the Kavanaugh confirmation. Well, nothing really happened that would affect the schedule. There's supposed to be a testimony from Miss Ford on Thursday, although I suspect maybe she might not show up, and Kavanaugh as well. There was a new allegation yesterday in the, I think it was Variety or the New Yorker, and the New York Times didn't run the story because they couldn't corroborate it. So that particular allegation doesn't seem to have a solid ground, and in the Ford case, it's now down to her basically saying that this happened, not sure when, but that it was indeed Kavanaugh. And Kavanaugh is pointing to, as is the president, that there were supposedly 4 witnesses that she named, including Kavanaugh, none of whom were saying it happened, but she's going to be heard on Thursday if she does indeed show up. So the president is backing Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh was on Fox News about an hour ago with his wife, giving his side of the story, denying all of the charges. Now, the other big news of today was Rosenstein. Now, the internet was abuzz this morning when news came out that first that Rod Rosenstein had resigned, and then it was changed to, well, he's resigned, but he's resigned orally to Kelly, and that he was heading over to the White House because he expected to be fired. Now, the whole story turned out to be apocryphal. That's the word of the day, false, because he neither resigned nor was heading to the White House to meet with the president. The meeting at the White House was previously scheduled, and if anyone was paying attention, Donald Trump was not at the White House today. He was making a big deal about being at New York to be at the UN, and also then to announce a free trade agreement with South Korea. So the reporters reporting on that story seemed that, I don't know why they would say that, but that's what they said. And then it turned out that President Trump had indeed spoken to Rosenstein today, but they didn't say that he was fired and that they're going to talk on Thursday. Now, the interesting thing about Rod Rosenstein is he's the one who's the Deputy Attorney General in charge of the Mueller investigation to supervise that process. He's the one who appointed Mueller. He's the one who recommended that Comey be fired. And remember what Mueller is investigating. He's investigating, with respect to Trump, 2 things. He's investigating the firing as an obstruction of justice. Well, Rosenstein wrote a memo explaining to Trump why he should be fired. And the other thing that Mueller is looking into is the Russian collusion. Well, Rosenstein has a conflict there too. He is the person who signed off on the 4th FISA warrant, which is one of the main, some say only, a basis for the Russian investigation in the first place. So in both instances, Mueller is supervising, Rosenstein is supervising Mueller on 2 counts, the obstruction of justice and the Russian investigation, both under which Rosenstein is not only a witness but also an actor. So I'm surprised he's even the Deputy Attorney General in charge of this in the first place. Now, that's not a reason for him to be fired, but it is a reason for him never to have been appointed to that position and possibly a reason to recuse himself. The other reasons that this is a very timely story is because this is what probably prompted the resignation, wasn't that? Because that's been known for a long time as conflicts, and also it's what's been known for a while as his refusal to comply with congressional document requests, and that he's facing impeachment from the Congress if he doesn't turn over the documents. But the real issue is, or the more pressing issue, more immediate one, is that there was a story that seems to have been corroborated, although he denies it. It was in the New York Times, and not that the New York Times, because it's in the New York Times, means it happened, is because Lisa Page and others also seem to have confirmed that Rod Rosenstein did indeed say, whether in jest or in seriousness, that he would wear a wire to capture Donald Trump in order to make the case that he's not fit to be president and could be removed under the 25th Amendment. Now, what people are not really pointing out, in that instance, though, he had not really been in the position more than a day for him to even make a determination that Trump was unfit. So it would appear, given that he did sign the FISA warrant and that he's making these comments in jest, that perhaps he's part of the whole alleged cabal to take down President Trump. So we'll see what happens on Thursday. We're going to get to the silver. But on Thursday, what might happen is Kavanaugh will be at the Senate, and maybe Miss Ford will appear. Maybe she won't. And on Thursday, there's a potential that Donald Trump indeed fires Rosenstein. And I'm not saying that Trump's decision to fire Rosenstein will be based on what happens on Thursday with Kavanaugh, but all this stuff is pretty much somehow connected, and I think there's a good chance, although not a certainty, that Ford doesn't show up and that Rosenstein is fired on Thursday. Now, if he is fired, there has to be a very clear explanation. Now, what some people say is he shouldn't be fired for political reasons because that would outrage people. An intermediate solution, which I actually think is a good idea, is to have him, ask him to recuse himself, or actually just take him off of the Mueller investigation, because he clearly is not implicated, but he's a witness and an actor in 2 of the main things that go to the heart of the case of what Mueller is investigating, and maybe put in somebody else to look at that. All right, let's take a look now at our silver issues. Okay, so what we're looking at in silver tonight is pretty much an update on the COMEX vaults, the commitment of traders, and I want to also take a look at the ETF. Let's look at the ETF first. Now, one of the things that I've always used as a indicator of price movements for gold has been the commitment of the gold ETF inflows and outflows. A lot of people like to look at the they like to look at the yen dollar. They look at the Chinese yuan. There's all types of different ways that people they look at the commitment of traders. They try to figure out where is the price of gold going. And what I've noticed is the closest one to my mind is the ETFs. And I'm going to show you for gold, but it doesn't apply to silver. Let's take a look at the gold ETF versus the price. That should be coming up on your screen in a second. And what you'll see is there's a fairly tight correlation going back to about 2009. Pretty much, well, actually, since the beginning. If you look at it now, if you go all the way to the left, and the left line, that black line at 400, that's the price of gold in 2004, before they even had a lot of ETFs. the big clump of shaded area in the middle, that is the gold ETF GLD. But they all generally tend to have inflows and outflows at approximately the same amount on a percentage basis. And you can see how the prices of gold, when it rises, you get the increasing amounts of gold going into the ETFs. And you can see the price of gold topping out in the middle of April of 2011. You can see it up there around $1,900. And you can see the inflows moving up and up. Now, there was one point between 2011 and 2013 when gold ETFs continued to show an inflow, even though the price looked like it had already topped and was doing some type of bottoming. But it did have a bounce in late 2012, where it went back up to about 17 and change. But then you can see, as the price goes down from 2013 all the way down to 2015, you see a steady decline in the gold, supposedly in the ETFs. You see that those outflows, and then precisely at the bottom, at the end of 2015, early 2016, as the price starts to rise, it's a little hard to see, but you could probably see it. You could see if you just try to follow that black line, you see the black line going up representing the increase in price, and then you see a significant increase in the gold ETF inflows as the amounts start to move back up. And then you could see at the end of 2015, we were below 50 million ounces of gold. And as 2016 progressed, it went over 70 million. And you could see how they almost correlate. And then when the price fell down again at the mid of 2016 towards 2017, you see that drop in ETF flows. And then you see an increase in gold ETFs as you go forward, as the price also moves up. Now, what's interesting here, for the first time at the very, very end of the chart, you can see the last 3 months or 2 months. It's hard to see, but the price of gold has gone down from about 1,300 to 1,200. But unlike the other moves in the past, the last 2 months, the gold ETFs have shown an increase in inflow. So there's a bit of a lack of correlation there. That either is going to mean that if you follow this correlation, that outflows are going to start and follow the price down, or the price is going to turn back up if there is a correlation on the basis of the inflows. I don't think there's a direct correlation, but it is interesting to follow this. I think in a macro sense, it is somewhat correct. Now, let's take a look at silver, and you're going to see it has no correlation unless you're standing on your head, and I don't know what you're doing, but you wouldn't see any correlation for the silver ETF. All right, let's take a look at the silver ETF. Now, the silver ETF is an entirely different story. The silver ETF shows essentially, since it opened, which is SLV with the largest green there, and all the other ETFs, pretty much it's gone up. Holdings have just increased. They rarely have decreased. We've been at that 600 million ounces plus for quite some time, going back to mid-2016 when they rose. But the price, you can see, other than, there's really no correlation. If you look at 2008, silver ETF holdings are increasing. The price is going down in 2009. Then there was a period between 2009 and 2011 where there was a direct correlation. But then you can see in 2011, as the price starts to fall and continues to fall, the silver ETF inflows continue to rise. So the only thing I can determine from this is not the price or where the price is going to be, but what I can determine is that there is 600 million plus ounces of silver in ETFs, which makes it a very large stockpile of silver. Now remember, 330 million or so of those ounces are held by JP Morgan in trust for they're acting as custodian. All right, so that's the ETFs. Let's now take a look at the COT report. For those of you, and I'll do a recap, for those of you who watched my show with Silver Doctors the other day, and also when I did a show on this about how much silver was leaving the JP Morgan vaults, I mentioned that I didn't find it odd that the commercials were net long for the first time. And the way I explained that is, you know what? I'll show you from this way. Okay. Was that as the price of silver rose, the red being the non-commercials, the commercials being the blue, that they would basically play yin-yang, and as the price rose, then the shorts would unwind their shorts, and the longs would unwind their longs, and then you can see almost a direct correlation. You start from left to right over the past few years, that they basically play this back and forth game. Is as the price is rising, the non-commercials go longer and longer, and then when the price starts to come down, they sell off their longs, and you can see that from left to right. You can see the red in the first very far left going up as the price goes up, and then as the price comes down, the reds, the non-commercials, sell down, and it's the mirror effect for the commercials. They indeed get shorter and shorter and shorter as the blue line goes down as the price goes up, and then when the price starts to come down, they unwind their shorts. Well, then what happened if you go all the way over to the far right, where there was a supposed dramatic first time in 17 years where the commercials, which are represented by the blue, were net long for the first time in 17 years. Now, that is a big deal. However, when I looked at it, remember, that's just net long. That doesn't mean that all the commercials are long, and these are grouped. That's just their net position. But what I had seen when I looked at this a couple of weeks ago, when you see the blue at the very far right, where they're now in the net long position, and the non-commercials are now in the net short position in the red, was that the reason for that, at least the way I view this chart, is that the non-commercials go long as the price rises, and then they start to unwind their longs as the price comes down, and the commercials do the vice versa. So if you look over where the price of silver was when it was over $17, with that first line that gets slashed down to the far right of the chart, you see the price is over $17. And for about 3 straight months, you see a price going down. And what I see is that starting from the area where it was flat, just to the left of that, that basically everyone was short, and there was no direction whatsoever. You could see that period where the reds and the blues are both below the line to the far right of the chart. And then once the silver hit its peak in that cycle at $17, you see the non-commercials at an all-time long, not all-time long, but at a height in that cycle, and you see the shorts, the blue, all the way down at their height. And as the price drops, you can see the reds, the non-commercials, starting to unwind their long positions, and you also see the blues starting to unwind their short positions. And my theory is, because this is the longest downward line straight down, that at some point they intersected, and you can see where it happens, where the blue ends up going north long, and the reds end up going south or short. But you can also see, if you can focus in very clearly on the last 3 lines, you can see the price of silver has rebounded off the bottom slightly, and you see exactly what I would expect to happen. The blues, the commercials, are starting, they're less long than they were 2 weeks ago. So you can see that it's going straight back down, and the non-commercials are unwinding their short position. So you see the blues, the commercials, not as long as they were last week or the week before, and you see the non-commercials not as short last week as they were the week before. And I would suspect if the price of silver rises this week, you'll probably see them both end up being about neither long or short. And if the price continues to rise, then I suspect we'll see a reversal of this, and eventually if we keep getting a price rise up to 15, the way this chart should work is the blues, the commercials, will end up below the line. They'll be short, and once again, the non-commercials will be long again. Anyway, that's how I'm looking at the chart. That's how it's worked that way. So take a look. We'll take a look at the end of the week. Next week, we'll revisit this chart on Monday. All right, the final thing I want to look at are the COMEX vaults and how much silver is in them. Now, the COMEX vaults, there was a story a long time ago that the COMEX was going to default because there wasn't enough silver in those vaults to deliver. And I'm going to show you the chart that shows that's not really an issue anymore. So back on September 7th, we took a look at this chart. And this chart shows the total amount of ounces of silver in the COMEX vaults. It's about 296 million ounces. Now, this chart doesn't show you how much is registered and how much is eligible. This is all of the eligible silver in the COMEX vaults. And there's a certain amount of it that's also registered. That's just the net amount. Now, that was on September 7th. There was 296 million ounces. And if you look now, the most recent, these, by the way, these are Nick Laird charts that he's put together here. If you look at the most recent chart, where you go from 296 million to the most recent chart of September 21st, the total silver in the COMEX vaults went down from 296 to 291 million. So it was a bit of a decrease. And now you can see since the end of 2016, it's pretty much been a accumulation process for the COMEX vault in the aggregate. But we have seen now this month a loss of 4.75 million ounces. Now, you really can't see it on the chart, and there have been other instances. These charts don't go straight up. I mean, directionally it's going straight up, but you do see the little nicks in that chart on the way up. If you look closely, you can see it's not straight up. But we're just going to have to watch this, and I will report on this from time to time to see if this is any type of trend or is just a nick. But more importantly is not, obviously, since there's 7 or 8 different COMEX vaults, they're not all going to have increases or decreases. But the one I like to keep an eye on, is the one everybody likes to keep an eye on, is the JP Morgan vault, because that's the one supposedly, that is the largest, it's not supposedly, but that's the one where JP Morgan holds its silver that it's supposedly holding for the long term that it bought over the last 6, 7, 8 years. And that's the one that, if that's the reason they bought it, then they wouldn't be selling now. They wouldn't be letting it leave the vaults now because the price is at $14, when the bulk of the purchases, if they did happen over the last 5, 6, 7 years, occurred much higher than $14. So you would think that if the idea is that they're holding it for the long term, they wouldn't be getting rid of it. But let's just take a look now at JP Morgan, because the bulk of that 4.75 million leaving the COMEX vaults is a 3 million ounce decrease in the JP Morgan vault. Back on September 6th, we have a JP Morgan vault showing a stockpile of 145,408,090 ounces. That was a peak for the JP Morgan vaults. And now if you take a look at the most recent chart, you'll see a decline in the JP Morgan silver holdings as of September 20th. And you can see now that they go down to 142,435,439 ounces. Again, these charts don't show a direct straight line up. Now, I can use this as evidence that if JP Morgan was holding on to silver so that 10 years from now, 5 years from now, whatever, and it's going to go up, they wouldn't sell any of it. And that would belie that argument. I don't think this is all their silver. But the other thing you can possibly extrapolate from it is that it's not all their silver. Maybe none of it is, but if it belongs to somebody else, then maybe somebody else is selling it. And that would mean that the silver stockpile isn't that large because there's others. The JP Morgan silver stockpile isn't that large at the vault because there's other silver mixed in with it. Or another possibility could be it is all JP Morgan's, or it is JP Morgan's and someone else's silver in there, but that they just moved some of the silver, 3 million ounces, out of the vault and they sent it elsewhere. It's hard to say, but I give you these charts so you can either make up your own mind or come up with your own theories. All right, but the other thing that's interesting is that C&T and BRIN'S are two vaults that have shown significant increases since the July of 2016. Very significant increases in the C&T vault. Back in July of 2016, the C&T vault had about 5 million ounces of silver. Okay, and now it has 40 million ounces, or as of September 6th, it had 39.876 million ounces. That's a huge increase. We haven't seen stories about how C&T is stockpiling silver. C&T is going to take over the world, but that is a big increase. We don't know who it belongs to. C&T is a depository. It's somewhere in Massachusetts. My understanding is a depository for client funds, for client metals. That's all I know about it, but big increase. So who knows why they're adding it? Don't know, but let's take a look at what they've added since September 6th, because I think they're now at 40 million ounces, and yes, indeed they are. So C&T goes from 39.8 million ounces on September 6th, and then by September 20th, they're at 40.1 million ounces. So that's a pretty big increase there. I mean, just in a week or so, they're over 40. Oh, reminded me that the U.S. Mint did report another round of silver additions or sales to authorized purchasers today. They had stopped selling silver 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we saw last week on Monday they had sold 500,000 American Silver Eagles to authorized purchasers, bringing the sales for the month up to 1,962,000. And they announced this morning, or on their chart this afternoon, that today they had sold another 75,000. So we don't know whether that's because all they were able to get was 75,000, or because that's all that was needed to satisfy demand. We'll follow up on that tomorrow, but let's get back now. So we mentioned that the overall COMEX vaults have lost silver. They lost about 4.7 million, but C&T has added in the last month and has gone from 5 million ounces all the way up to 40 million ounces this month. Now let's take a look at the other big vault, which is BRINE'S, which is adding. On September 8th, in September, they too had about over 40 million ounces, 43.66 million ounces. And I think they lost a few, not that much. I think they lost some silver in September, but you can see in July too, they were around 19-20 million ounces. So they've more than doubled their silver, and C&T has done like a 7-fold, 8-fold increase in their vault. So they're really stockpiling their silver. Let's take a look at the other BRINE'S, the more recent. So you had 43.66. I think they go to 43.566 or something like that. Let me just take a look here. BRINE'S, they didn't lose much. They might have lost 100,000, a little over 100,000 ounces, 150,000 ounces, and there it is, 43.666.053 goes to 43.506.067. All right, I think that's it on what I wanted to show you tonight. Let's take a look at the comments. So tomorrow we'll take a look at the American Silver Eagle sales update and see if they've managed to either sell more to authorized purchasers or they're just not going to sell anything. And let's see. That's it. Okay, let's look at the comments. Nomadic Giant says, good evening, good evening. Spoke O's. Explain this EFP BS we're seeing here in 2018, clear manipulation. What is EFP BS? I'll give you time. Maybe you can respond below, Spoke as while I answer these other questions. Chiefly Chieftain, hey Smaulgld, everybody, is it Monday already? Yes, indeed it is. C. Joe says it's 8 a.m. here. Tuesday, you guys are behind time. Larry Mattilla, any report on silver imports into China? Let me get back to you on that. I've been tracking silver imports into India. The most recent month was small-ish, 314 tons into India in July. It's just about 10 million ounces. I mean, it's a lot, but it's actually down from last July. But year to date Indian silver imports are up 40% from last year, and they're on pace for about 7,000 tons to be imported. One of the bigger years. So India has a big silver import year this year, and so do they for gold. Spoke as exchange for physical. Exchange for physical where? I'm not sure what you mean. I don't doubt there's manipulation, and there's many ways they can manipulate, but I'm not quite sure where you're seeing exchange for physical on what exchange are you looking at? OMG says. All right. All right. If you don't have any more questions, I'm going to call it a night. I want to thank everyone for joining me tonight, and we'll be back again tomorrow night at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Spokes says you're disappointing me, Lewis. Well, I'm sorry to hear it. You get what you pay for. And we'll see you tomorrow night, 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time here on YouTube. Also, you can check Smaulgld out on BitChute, on Gab, on Twitter, on Facebook, on minds.com, and on smaulgld.com. So check you out there, and we'll see you tomorrow night.